All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy, GS Luke, live from Pittsburgh for this week's preview for the US Open. Going to get you guys ready for all of your lineups this week with a look at the weather report, any player deep dives or questions that you've got for me in the chat, as well as some strategy talk, also lineup construction on DraftKings to go ahead and put it all together. But hopefully you can hear me okay. It is a little bit of a different setup than what I normally have. Might not sound normal, different mic being that we're on the road, but hey, the show goes on and super stoked to get into everything for this week. So first off, say hi if you guys haven't already, and also smash the like button for the SHIPIT Nation crew. It's a major week. We're going to get a lot more views on this sort of content, so make sure to subscribe as well if you guys haven't already, if this is your first time watching this channel, because we do previews every single week, not just for this event, but also every single event in between. And I think you might fall in love with golf with Oakmont Country Club here. So if that's the case, make sure to smash that subscribe button too. We got Sean in chat, welcome on in. Also Alan, Ross, some regulars. C. Floyd, love to see that the community is there early. Also Nick asking how the trip is so far. Fantastic. Got to spend some time with my family last night and walk the golf course today, so no complaints from my end. So hopefully the week is going well for everyone else out there too. We got Jack Wayne with the question, which we'll get to in a little bit. Ben Jizzy, this Alex Smith. Oh, former 49ers quarterback in chat, huh? Takedown sites, Kevin, Go Collect. I see all of you guys down there. Hopefully you're having a fantastic week so far. And I gotta say, major week, the chat is absolutely flooded. I don't know if I can say hi to all you guys. We got Jordan, Michael, Anthony, Brant, Carolina Reaper, Josh, and Tim. I think that touches on all of it. Don't want to leave any of you guys out. Let's get this thing rocking. So started off with the golf course, and what I noticed today that nothing really surprised me is what I'll say about this course. It's infamous for being the most difficult that you have in the world, and everything I saw today ended up backing that up. The rough is as lush as you see with some of those videos and social media, but really I think the thing that you can't get a grasp for unless you're at the golf course is how nasty the green complexes are. In fact, that was my one real big takeaway from what I saw today, was that there's going to be double bogeys because of people 4 or 5 putting some of these Oakmont Country Club greens. So I think if you're somebody that struggles on the greens, this could be a really tough week for them. It's not like it's a putting fest though, because from tee to green, it's maybe the hardest test that we have the entire year. I think that everyone's going to get beat up. I think winning score at most, maybe like 4 or 5 under, probably close to even par when it's all said and done. So I think a lot of that will depend on how Scotty Scheffler plays. But this golf course, in my opinion, we'll see how it bears out this week. I think a lot of the top guys are going to miss the cut. It looks like carnage. It looks like the kind of track that even good play is going to be punished. You saw players really frustrated out there. I also noticed that. But a few guys that were taking it the right way. And I think Wyndham Clark may have had the best mindset of all, which I know that sounds backwards because, you know, he's usually a pretty grumpy, angry guy on the golf course, but he was putting, he was hitting the ball like 10 feet past the hole, and he was playing with Goddard up in his practice round, and they were just laughing to each other. So they were on their last hole of the day, so maybe they were just beaten up after 18 holes and had given up at that point. But these guys know what they're getting, and I think having mental strength, that component is maybe even bigger than form and the kind of course fit that you have around here. So I would say in general, if there's a lot of chalk out there, especially towards the middle to the bottom end of the board, fade them. This is a week like the Cognizant Classic where I think the golf course is going to win. Now up top with your top 5, top 10, I do only think a select handful of players can actually win around here, just because of how difficult it is from tee to green. A lot of that 9, 10, even 11 to 14K range, like you have with Scotty Scheffler, encapsulates that win equity. But after you get past those first 10 players in the pricing, then I think game theory becomes everything for your lineup. So we'll talk about that from the lineup construction angle, but I'll be playing quite a bit of chalk towards the top. But when you get towards the middle to the bottom end of the board is we're going to have to be a lot more careful about doing so. And there's a lot of guys in the 7K range that I could see missing the cut at really high ownership. And if so, the 6 of 6 rate could be just nuclear low at this sort of golf tournament. So that's what I'll say about the track. We'll talk on a lot of specifics on players and things I noticed about the course throughout this live stream, but really, there's nothing that surprised me. Everything that we knew about Oakmont was confirmed in person today, just that those greens were really the star of the show for me. From the weather angle, it's pretty boring the first few days. I don't see a massive weather edge to be had. Let's go ahead and show you exactly what it looks like. So this is the HRRR model for Oakmont Country Club. Yes, the Pennsylvania Turnpike does go straight through the golf course, but no wind tomorrow. Looks like it's going to be a pretty good scoring day, which for Oakmont's probably 2.5 over par. So, good scoring day. Let's put that in quotes. It's still going to be one of the hardest rounds of the entire year. And then on Friday, it looks a little more dicey just because there's a chance of rain that day. We're going to go to the NEM model just because it's a little bit more loaded in at this point, unlike the HRRR, which was cut off in that early afternoon. And on this one, it looks pretty flat too. Now, a little bit of a storm could shake things up a little bit in the PM wave, but almost 2 days away, it's really hard to predict that sort of stuff. So based on the two forecasts that we've seen, I'll bring up the GFS model here too to take a look at Friday, a little bit of a sprinkle forecasted Friday afternoon. I don't see an actionable weather edge. I don't see one side of the draw really getting the best of the conditions. The one thing I would say is that tomorrow morning is, I think, going to be by far the best conditions of the week. Let me zoom out here so that we can see the oh goodness. Can I do it on the view tab? Is that how you do this? Yeah, zoom out. Let's see if that works. It did. Unlike trying to do the console command. If we go to HRRR over here, what I wanted to show you guys is over here on Friday morning, I think these guys are going to have the best conditions because the course is already starting to dry out. They got a lot of rain on Monday, Tuesday that did soften things up. But even today, when I was out there on the golf course, it was starting to get crispier as the day went on. So tomorrow morning, there might be some residual effects of that, maybe some slightly better scoring conditions. But those storms on the afternoon on Friday, right, would neutralize any sort of an edge that you have there. So that's why I'm not really playing it in one direction or the other. All my lineups are played without any sort of stacking in either direction. I would say as a 150 maxer that you could consider taking like 10-15% and stacking it towards either direction, but I think that'd be kind of getting cute here. It doesn't look like the weather is going to be a massive factor for either day. And maybe for showdown in round number 1, you do play some of those morning guys, some of the guys going off early to take advantage of those wetter conditions, but I don't think it's going to be a massive effect. You're maybe looking at like a quarter of a stroke advantage, I'd say, versus the first versus the second half, but could be a good tiebreaker, I guess, for some of your Thursday exposure. So the weather, like I said, boring for the first few days, but it is always worth checking before lock. And this could completely flip on its head for all we know tomorrow morning. But Pittsburgh weather, not as volatile as what you have in the tropics. So like unlike a Texas course, a Florida course, where the weather can kind of just flip on its head over an hour, Pittsburgh, I can tell you from growing up in this area, having a lot of connections here, it still happens at times. Weathermen aren't the best at their job, but these forecasts tend to all agree with each other. I wouldn't expect them to get vastly different by tomorrow morning. But if you do wake up before then, if you're somebody that wants to make just in case, right, wants to make sure tomorrow morning, wake up, check these models, make sure that there's nothing crazy going on Thursday and Friday, because if there is a half a stroke to a 1 stroke advantage, you're going to want lineups that are stacked in that direction, whether they're 5-1s, taking 5 guys from that side of tee times, or even a full 6-0, trying to take advantage of that. If that exists, that is something that we want to attack, but based on what I'm seeing right here, I don't see it for the first few days. So that's the weather angle. That's the golf course angle. Any specific questions you have about Oakmont, feel free to go ahead and let me know. What we're going to do next is we're going to go through the ownership towards the top end of the board. So let me go ahead and share that with you guys here. And these are going to be the top 10 highest owned players on the slate. And these are per my projections that I have on my Patreon page, but they're not anything wild. I would say they're pretty spot in line with what you should see in a lot of other spots. Really, the chalk up top is very predictable on a week like this. A lot of it is the betting steam that you've seen. Some of it is the content guys like Neiman getting steamed to crap. Sepp Straka with his form. We'll touch on why some of these guys are chalk. And what you'll notice about them, though, is that it's a lot of the 9, 10, and 11 plus K players that are towards the top end of the board here. A Straka, a Lowry, a Corey Connors would be the exception to that rule. The only players that are in the 7K range there. And yes, Shane Lowry, Connors, those were two of the plays that we talked up on Monday. I'm going to have to play despite 20% plus ownership on, which makes me want to throw up in my mouth a little bit, especially with the kind of carnage that I think is coming, which probably tells you what I'm doing with Sepp Straka at about 22% ownership, because if I didn't love a guy on Monday, he wasn't one of my top plays that I had on the board, there's no chance that I'm going to play him as mega chalk towards the top. So let me catch up on chat, see if there's any specific questions we can touch on before we go through ownership. And then after we do the ownership, so I'm going to hold off on any player deep dives until I do the ownership angle up top, because we're going to do those all together, because I know in a major week, we're going to have a lot of those. So I want to make sure we have the time for it. By the way, guys, we do have the celebration stream tonight. So if you guys haven't already seen the news, at 7 p.m. Lord's time zone, so 8 p.m. Eastern for those that aren't educated on that yet, which, by the way, how could you not? My guy James made that well known around the community, but make sure to tune into that as well. That's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern time on the SHIPIT Nation YouTube channel, so you don't have to really go anywhere. I guess you got to click on another live stream, but the same YouTube that you're watching right now, and we're going to celebrate James's life. So obviously tune into that if you guys can, and wanted to remind you of that before we moved on. So where did we leave off? Do you want to make sure any questions were touched on right away? I already went through the Nick question about the trip. Let's see. Best pivots under $6,500. We'll do that with the deep dive section. So we'll hold off on that one, Wayne, but I won't forget about you. Same thing with the thoughts on Novak. Player deep dives, I'm going to hold off on for right now. Let's see. We got Andrew Chief down there. Happy Spieth week. Yeah, at least for me, I'm playing a whole lot of Spieth this week. Maybe you are too, Andrew. It'd be nice to have you on board the Spieth train. Yeah, Alex Smith in the house. Yeah, it cracks me up when we got the celebrity names in chat. Hey, you never know. Maybe it is Alex Smith. That would be pretty cool. He said, you know the deal, Sicko open lineup, throwing some ideas for the chat down there. And Josh likes it. Lovely jubbly from Brian, absolute legend, by the way. Welcome on in, man. Looks like a lot of player pool questions, so maybe we'll just touch on those a little bit later. It looks like almost all of them are player pool questions. I wanted to see if there's any strategy or maybe weather stuff before we talked about that. But yeah, it's mostly stuff about players. So let's go through ownership before we talk through all of those. So ownership towards the top, I mean, Scotty, nearly 40% owned. Bryson being steamed the crap on every single piece of content that you can see. I don't disagree with it, though. And, you know, I already started kind of hinting at my strategy for this week, but there's going to be chalk. You guys know I'm playing Scotty, but I'm also playing Bryson DeChambeau this week. Then I'm just eating towards the top end of the board. I know that I don't have to get different with my 10, 11K players because I think around this golf course that mental aptitude and form kind of matters, but ownership really matters when the guys start to suck, because when you start to get down towards that 6, 7K range, I think a lot of those guys are going to miss the cut, especially like the chalky guys. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Shane Lowry missed the cut or Corey Connors did. That's why it makes me throw up in my mouth when I want to play those sort of guys. But a Bryson and a Scotty Scheffler, I do feel a little bit better about it. So that's why I'm taking my stance up top, and I'm okay playing those chalky players there, because I know further down the board with my guys that are value plays compared to the rest of the board, that I'm going to have the ability to get that differentiation that I need. Now, if I'm starting with a Bryson or a Scotty up top, and I want to use a Shane Lowry or a Corey Connors, which I'm going to have those kind of combinations in my set of 150, I'm going to have to really offset that with my last 4 players. I'm going to probably want at least 2 or 3 pivots, probably closer to the 3 mark, because you're starting with 2 guys that are over that 20% ownership. So the reason why we go through this ownership towards the top is to point out players that you might want to think twice about before playing. That's not to say that I'm fading the whole top end of the board. You guys know I'm playing Scotty, still taking Lowry, Connors, and Fleetwood in quite a few lineups. But of the rest of the guys up here, I mean, let me just count them in my head right now. At least 3 of them are fades for me, if not even more than that, are fades in my exposure. And even some of the guys up here are guys I'm just matching the field on too, so it's not like I'm getting that massive leverage to them. You can't play everyone towards the top end of the board, and that's coming from somebody that's a 150 max player. So if you're somebody entering like 2 to 3 lineups, you definitely need to be fading a lot of the top end of the board here. But even if you're a 20 max player and you have a slightly bigger net to work with, you should be fading probably at least half of the guys that are 9K plus. With 50 max, you might be able to go slightly over half if you're going after some of the low-round guys towards the top end of the board. But really, playing half and then fading half of the top end of the board is usually a pretty good barometer to work with. And you can play less than half if you want to play a little bit tighter, maybe have more leverage on your guys towards the top. You can play a little bit more than half of them if you don't want to have as much leverage. If you're okay having 1.25, 1.5x leverage as opposed to that full 2x that most people use as a benchmark. There are different ways that you can play the top end of the board, but even if you do play slightly more than half of them, you're still going to have to find spots to make fades. So I would say if you're going to use somebody up top, love them, be somebody that you were on a Monday. So for example, Joaquin Niemann is nearly 25% owned. I don't love Niemann at this course. I guess I'll be transparent and say I'm not playing him. He is one of those fades I'm taking towards not taking in my lineups towards the top end of the board. And it's not to say that I think he's a bad player. I mean, he's won like 4 times on the Live Tour this year, 3 or 4 times. It's just ridiculous number compared to everyone else over there. I mean, obviously deserving of some steam, especially at $8,600. But this is a golf course, like I said, that brings carnage to the table. So unless you were sold on them, as soon as you started looking at the pricing of the slate, then maybe you should consider staying away from that sort of play. For me, Niemann wasn't those first 4 or 5 guys towards the top that I was considering in my lineups. So that's why I'm taking a stand against that sort of play. And Straka is another one of those guys that I'm not playing. And I'll point out another one. Colin Morikawa, another player I'm not using. Not to say I think he's a bad course fit. I mean, he's a similar fit to a Corey Connors and a Fleetwood. And those are 2 players that I'm using in lineups that I really like around here. But because he wasn't one of those first clicks, especially at like 10 grand, I like the guys around him just a little bit more. He's not going to be in my player pool for this kind of a week. And I don't share those decisions to say that you have to make the same ones yourself. Of course not. That's just how I see this kind of slate breaking down. But I do tell it to you to show you that like there are some hard decisions to be made. Like Straka's form, I really want to play that. I mean, the guy's won me a lot of money this year on his outrights and his DFS performances, but I just can't do it. I mean, even Colin, I'm a sucker for playing him more than most people around this industry. And even I have to take a stand against some of these guys towards the top. So just be convicted with your plays up here. I'd say 1.5x leverage would be the lowest I would go. That's at least my personal strategy when I'm going with a 150 max. If you're in a 20 max situation, minimum probably should be 2x leverage that you're taking on these players. So, a Scotty Scheffler, if you're using them in that 20 max pool, 65 to 70% should be the number that you're looking for. And 65% would be a little bit under that 2x, but that's still a pretty aggressive stand. I'm okay with that. I'm in a 20 max contest, but you want to be more aggressive the smaller amount of lineups that you're playing. So, single entry, be as aggressive as humanly possible. With 50 max, you can choose to be a little bit more conservative, but that's what I've got with the ownership. You can see Cantlay, Xander, Morikawa, Fleetwood, all going to be getting some steam, but really the ones, I'm just going to highlight them in red over here, that you really kind of have to worry about are Connors. Connors is a 7K player. Sorry, I meant to click Lowry there, but Lowry too. Also a 7K player, and then Sepp Straka too at $7,700. Up top, it's going to be kind of unavoidable to be taking that ownership. In this range, you can definitely get different if you have to. So just, again, it's not who you play, it's how you play them. You just got to keep that in mind when you're building your lineups. And some water, by the way. I've had a few brewskis on the golf course, so we need to rebound with some water at this point. Been a long day, so we're off the beer for the day. So best 2 pivots under $6,500. So let me actually bring up my spreadsheet, and I can let you know. I'll let you guys into the hotel room while I take a look at my spreadsheet on the side over here. So just 1 second while I bring that up. And the reason I say that is I'm going to give you more than just 2. I'm going to give you a few that I'm playing and even a few that I'm not playing, just to give you a few ideas, because, again, this isn't a build your player pool sort of thing. I just want to give you some ideas towards the bottom. You're saying 6,500 and cheaper, right? So the chalky answer to that question would be a Nick Taylor. He's probably the most popular player below there. Pendrith actually is 10% owned at $6,500. Aaron Rai getting some steam towards the bottom end of the board. If you're looking for form, it would be those kind of guys that you're playing. So, like, let's say you differentiated elsewhere in your lineup, I'd be okay with those sort of guys because they're the best projections on this portion of the board. However, and it's a big however, Carnage is a thing, and you guys know I'm trying to get different towards the bottom end of the board. I'm looking for pivot plays. So just to point out a few pivot plays that, might make sense on that board. Brian Harman, I've got at like sub 3% ownership. That feels like a pretty decent spot, especially at a course that rewards driving accuracy. Lucas Glover's a good ball striker, also a relatively accurate driver of the golf ball. A few of these guys, again, I'm not going to have in my poll, but I just want to throw out ideas because I still think they're decent plays. I just couldn't get there myself. Who else? Like a Ryan Gerard. I mean, he's a real good ball striker towards the bottom. A Victor Perez, pretty decent ball striker towards the bottom. Doug Gim, he's down at $5,900. All those guys I just pointed out are sub 2.5%, 3% projected ownership in my projections this week. So maybe worth a few looks. I think it kind of depends on what you're doing with the rest of your lineup. And down low, at least in my opinion, on a week like this, you want to get different to the field. It's just, I think you're going to see a bunch of randomness at this sort of golf course. And it kind of makes me scared about betting Scotty Scheffler, to be honest. It looks that hard, but the cream should rise to the top. It is a U.S. Open and a major after all. And he said you were looking for overlooked guys. I didn't see the second part of that until now. So yeah, those second half guys are probably the ones you want, the ones that are being a little bit overlooked. Let's see. And by the way, Alex Smith was saying that the U.S. Open's the stone nuts. You're absolutely correct. If you happen to be the actual quarterback, Alex Smith, you're a legend. You won me a lot of money, by the way, playing you your last few years. Olison's the one you'd say. You're looking towards the bottom. Okay, I like that. Where do we leave off? Looking for specific questions. He said, Luke, you're the Matt McCarty whisperer. How do I feel about on this week? Ooh, hard golf courses like this kind of scare me with Matt McCarty. I saw him for some of his practice round today, and I do have to say that he looked pretty stressed out there. Normally one of like the most free-loving guys on tour. Him and his caddy are best friends, so I think that's a lot of the reason for that. He's very comfortable every time he's out there playing, but him and Brian Campbell weren't speaking. They were on the 12th hole, so I think they had already played 9. They were on their back 9 at that point, and he was in the intermediate cut, so he wasn't even in the deep rough, and he chunked one into the rough on the left side. So I don't know. I would say that the look didn't look great out there, but I love Matt McCarty. I hope he plays well this week. I'm personally not going to have some exposure. The other portion of it, Alan, is that he is getting some steam. I do see him at over 2.5%, 3% ownership in my projections, which is it's not terrible ownership. You can still get some leverage on a 2 or 3%er, but a lot of these guys I pointed out just now to Wayne are sub 1.5%, sub 1% ownership in some cases. To Spieth or not to Spieth, what would DGen do? Ooh, so the ownership is normally what DGen uses with a Jordan Spieth, at least based on what I recollect from back in the day. I would say you'd probably play him at the spot. He's sub 10% owned. Not a lot of people are going to be playing Jordan Spieth, and I think his role was when everyone else doesn't play Jordan Spieth, you use him in your lineups. And I'm partial to him this week. I bet him for top 10. I think he's a fantastic play. So if the ownership angle's good there too, then maybe we all got to ride the train together. I got to say, it's a crazy train. It's the bogey and birdie train. So get ready for a rocky ride if you're playing them. Thoughts on Neiman? So he's really chalky is, I guess, the one downside to Joaquin Neiman. The positive is that he's got the best form really of anyone on the live golf side. He's playing even better than Jon Rahm is, which is hard to do. He's literally finished top 10 every single time on the live tour, but Joaquin Neiman has more of the top 3 in wins compared to a Jon Rahm. I mean, he's a 7.5 out of 10 on paper. I mean, he's a really good projecting play. The big downside is that he's the 3rd highest owned player, like you can see on the board right there. So you got to weigh that. If you were on him on a Monday, if it was one of your top level plays, I'm totally fine using him. You could differentiate towards the middle to the bottom end of the board. It's just that I obviously prefer other guys, if that makes sense. Thoughts on Straka and Reed? I really like Reed. Reed was a guy that I took the top 10, top 20 this week. So I like the short game. I like the fact that he's played well at courses with really fast, really undulating greens. Sepp Straka, just like Joaquin Neiman. So these questions I think are very similar on those two players. Some of the best form on the PGA Tour side. However, you're paying that with 22% ownership. So if you have other spots in your lineup where you're taking sub 5% owned players, 2-3 of them in your set of 6 players, large field GPP, you get away with a Sepp Straka. But if you're in one of those contests, big $5 or $25 GPP, and you only have 1, maybe 2 pivots in that lineup, you might want to think twice about a Straka. You can still play somebody that's not sub 5% owned in that spot, but you probably don't want the guy that's 22% owned if you're really chalky elsewhere. Talk out of using Woodland. I can't do it, Brant, because I'm using them myself. So maybe we're crazy for doing it. Maybe we need a knock over the head by somebody because we're playing Gary Woodland. But I got to say, he plays well at really difficult golf courses. I mean, U.S. Open track record, he's a past winner. I'm okay with it. I don't love the play. I'm using him as a super low owned option. And in fact, most of you watching this, please don't use him, right? We got to keep him under that 1.5% ownership that he's coming in at. He's essentially unowned on a week like this. So me, Brant, probably the only two people boneheaded enough to use him in lineups. But hey, cheers to you, my man. Hopefully it works out for us too, huh? Is a low-owned Rory the best leverage play this week? I don't know if he's the best leverage play, but he's a damn good leverage play towards the top. I don't know if he's the best, though. He's let's see. I think my ownership, I have him around 10%. Let's give you guys a barometer on the exposure there. He's a tough one for me. I'm not sure how it's going to go for Rory. I either think he's going to miss the cut pretty embarrassingly, or he's going to play very well and contend to win this sort of thing. So we'll see if he can figure the thing out. Let's see if he can get that form move in the right direction. But it's a hard one to read, in my opinion. I don't know which way it's going to go. Josh was not a fan of Rory, it looks like. I got to say, the ownership might even be lower than 10% based on some of the chat so far. You guys are savages down there. I love it. That makes you feel better about being underweight on Straka. Hey, if he nukes and he kills us, we've got showdown for rounds 2 through 4. So cheers to you, Sean. Hopefully it works out for us. Thoughts on Akshay and Denny as potential value plays? So Ryan, I'm on both this week. Both are in my player pool. I mean, you guys know I'm an open book, really, when it comes to my exposure at most points. You guys can find, by the way, all my projections, all my exposure on my Patreon page. I tell everyone who I play over there. So if you guys are curious and you want all the projections, you can find those on that site. But yeah, Akshay, Denny, both in my player pool because they're relatively accurate drivers. Akshay's above average accuracy. Denny's top 50 driver in terms of driving accuracy. And Denny's played well at Memorial. It's one of my comp courses here. And Akshay, he doesn't have as much comp course history, but him playing well at a course like TVC Sawgrass in the Players, I think is at least good evidence that he's capable of doing it at this sort of golf course. So we'll see. I really like Denny this week, though. Absolutely. God bless D-Gen. That is amen to that, man. What's up, Luke? Let's smash this week. I would love to. Let's get after it. Let's see. Hey, it's Wilson, the volleyball from Castaway. How are you? I gotta say that's a great movie. Not that Alex Smith, unfortunately. I know it's a common name. Am I making a roll of a max number of Bryson, Scotty, Connors, and Lowry? I'm not Go Collect. I have a different way to do it with my product ownership, but I would want at most 2 of those guys in a lineup. I wouldn't want 3 of them in a lineup. I definitely wouldn't want all 4 together, though. But me setting a product ownership cap is going to accomplish that. If you don't have product ownership as a part of the optimizer that you're using, then you could use rolls to take care of that. And I would probably set it to a max of 2 of those guys because let's talk about why you wouldn't want both guys down low, right? If you had Connors and Lowry in a lineup together, even up top, if you're using pivots, and we'll put those in quotes because everyone's like over 10% ownership, that's 9K plus. If you use a pivot towards the top, it's 10% there, 10% there, 20% in the 7K range. You don't really have any ownership leverage in that sort of lineup. So you wouldn't want those 2 together. And then, if you went, let's say Bryson, Scotty, and then one of those 2 players, you might be able to get away with that, but your other 3 players in that lineup would have to have all your leverage. I mean, probably all have to be sub 5% ownership in that sort of build. That's why I would limit it to 2, if that makes sense. How much salary can you have left in a lineup for a 20 max? I personally don't push it past $500 on most main slates. But realistically, you can leave up to 1,000, and I don't think you'd be giving up too much win equity. But I normally live in that $200 to $500 range at the very most. And in fact, most of my lineups either spend all the salary or $100 within the max salary. You're saying in a 20 max? Yeah, at most 2, I would say. How about our local hero, Matt Vogt? Dude, it's going to be fun to see him play out there. He's I don't think he's from Pittsburgh anymore. I know he's originally kind of like me, right? I'm a transplant down here in South Florida now. I hope he plays well. It'd be cool. I know he's a former caddy at the golf course. Freaking Neil Shipley, he's the other one. He used to be a caddy at Oakmont. I wish he was in this field. Better to be late than never. Absolutely, Ed. Welcome on in. He said, hey, Luke, do I think Bud Colley and Ryan Gerard are good course fits? I don't know if I'd say they're great course fits, but both are accurate off the tee, which if I had to lean accuracy or distance, I do lean accuracy at this course just because the rough is as penal as it is. So I'm okay with both. They're just kind of like decent plays for me. I don't love either of those two, but better than most, we would say. You say, can I pair two 15% projected ownership guys in one lineup? For sure, especially like for your 9, 10K guys, you can get away with that if you're differentiating down low. We're going to come into some issues is when it's 3+ that you're playing at 15% plus. So even if you don't have like a product ownership cap, you could set a role to only have, let's say, like, 2 guys over 20% ownership in a lot. That's probably what I would do. I wouldn't do it at 15. I would probably raise it up to 20, then only want 2 guys over that number. I think that's a fair way to do that. He said, when Scotty wins at -1, it doesn't end up in any optimal lineups. Welcome to Oakmont. We'll see. I think if he wins, he's going to be in the optimal, but it would take some wild stuff for him to not make it if he wins. He said, Cam Young is going to be absolute mega chalk. I don't see that, Micah. I've got him getting some steam, but not nearly as much as what we thought on like a Monday. So I guess it depends on what ownership source you're looking at. That's just based on what I've ran for the week, but I've got him as well above average ownership, but not like a mega chalk at that portion of the board. Thoughts on Lowry? He said Jim Nance likes him. I certainly like him this week. He's down as a core play for me. I didn't know if he was a core value, top 10 bet in my portfolio. Last time he played here, he performed very well. He ended up he was in the 54-hole leader. He was -7, ended up shooting way over par on Sunday to kind of choke it away. If he does that again, that's fine because he's cheap. Top 5, top 10 is going to get the job done at that kind of price tag. I like him quite a bit. Good course fit. He's accurate off the tee. Really good short game too. Out of long rough. That's what pays around Oakmont Country Club. By the way, guys, we got nearly 200 people now in this live chat. If you already smashed that like button already, go ahead and do so. Let's get those numbers up. Let's pump them up for the SHIPIT Nation crew here. Thoughts on Victor Hovland and Berger as GPP plays? So I like the ownership on both, Ryan. So if you're playing in a GPP specifically, I think there's upside to both of them. I will say that I'm playing one of those two in my lineups, and it was the ownership that put me onto them. It was also kind of the course fit with the one that I was playing, but I'm okay with both of those. How do I feel about Reed and Thomas making the cut? Ooh, I have to see the odds, Mario, because I'm assuming that's why you're asking, right? If not, if it's for DFS, I like them in general. I do like short game around this golf course. And something else I noticed today, I'll mention it after walking the premises, is that around the green play is going to be important for making birdies. Hole 2, hole 17 are drivable par 4s. If you guys aren't already familiar with them, just over 300 yards apiece. They are uphill, so not everyone can just drive the green complex. But at the very worst, most of the field, maybe 75, 80% of it, are going to be within 20, 30 yards of the front, which means good around the green players, like a Justin Thomas, like a Patrick Reed, that you asked about in both cases, are going to have a pretty good chance to make birdies on those holes, because as long as they're not driving it in the heavy rough, they're going to be able to put some spin on the ball out of the really tight approaches that you have. And especially JT, I mean, both of them, both top 3, top 5 short game players in the world. There's 2 opportunities for that for every single round. And then the 2 par 5s, one of them's reachable on the front 9. The back 9, 112 is kind of dicey. It depends on where they put the tee box. If they move up the tee box, it will be reachable. If not, especially for Patrick Reed's not getting there, but maybe JT could with a really good drive. You're also chipping on a lot of those par 5s. So, I was walking the course, I'm sitting there like, wow, these guys that have good short games, they're going to be making some birdies on those holes. And then on the harder holes, they're going to have a good chance to get up and down. I like them to make the cut for that reason, because the more and more the week has gone on, I think that category means even more than what I was giving it credit for. Thoughts on Ortiz? I'm assuming you mean Carlos. His brother Alvaro is also in the field this week, though. I like the form with Carlos. He's one of the top 10 players on Live Golf this year. He's cheap. He's a 6, maybe I thought he was 6K range, maybe bottom end of the 7K range player in this sort of event. I like him quite a bit. Harmon is shorter than the rough. Yeah, he might get lost out there if he's not careful. DJ loved giving him crap for that too. So I like that you guys are roasting him in the chat. He might end up withdrawing if he gets lost. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, man. He said Griffin also looks like a solid play. He's been showing good form his last few starts. Form you can't deny at all. I mean, in contention over and over, won that event. yeah, if you're looking for a form player, Ben Griffin, by all means, should probably be in your top 5. What I will say, though, is he wasn't in that top 10 of the ownership that we had. Of course, guys, there's some guys just outside of there that are in the 7K range that are chalk too. Ben Griffin is one of those players. So if you're going to use him, just know that the ownership's there. Again, it's not who you play, it's how you play them. Get different around a Ben Griffin. Yeah, thoughts on Griffey. So there's the thoughts there. Hopefully that helps you. Thoughts on Bav McNeely. So, ooh, okay, we'll say it. I'm allowed to give away some of the boots on the ground stuff here that I was kind of saving for myself. He was one of the few players that was happy on the golf course today. And every time I saw a smile from players, I was like an eagle eye looking for that, because trust me, there were not a lot of smiles on that golf course. Mav McNeely, though, him and his brother Scout were shooting the shit. They were real happy putting and whatnot. I'm playing him this week. Maybe it's the mindset. He's got it and a lot of other people don't, but he's super low owned. No one's using him. So if you're looking for a GPP pivot, he has that. And, it's a silly reason why I play him. I caught him happy on the golf course, right? Like, oh, that doesn't mean he's going to play well this week. You're right. But he's low owned, and it's better than, picking names out of a hat and trying to find a guy. So I'm okay with him. Course fit wise, though, Nick, he plays well at difficult tracks. You saw that at Torrey Pines at the Genesis. Nearly ended up pulling off that win. In general, he's played a lot better in 2025. Last month, though, been on the downtick, right? Has not been playing his best golf. That's why he's coming in at lower ownership, but I think it's substantiated. I could see it. Did I get a chance to watch Bud practice? I saw him in the range a bit, Cedric. Unfortunately for Bud, he was on the range for quite some time. Now, I didn't watch every swing of his. It was kind of off to the side where I couldn't get a good view of it, but he was out there for at least an hour grinding on the range, which was a lot longer than other players. It looked like most players were spending their time on the golf course, getting an idea for the different contours, the different sloping that you have around this golf course. He was grinding on the swing, which I'll also say this about the boots on the ground stuff. Davis Riley. Oh God, I hate saying this because he's probably gonna win now. I say this, but he looked lost, like purely lost. He had his swing coach doing his backswing for him. You don't love to see that. But Colley was kind of grinding on the range. Fleetwood had a mountain of golf balls out there, and I bet Fleetwood to top 5. So that scares me about Fleetwood. I'm still playing him. I'm not backing down my bet. I'm not cashing it out or anything, but you don't love to see that the day before an event. Who else? Sepp Straka looks good on the range. So I'm still fading Straka, as I mentioned before, but he looked really good out there. I'm just going to go to my profile on Twitter just to kind of remind myself, because I saw a lot out there today, guys. Harris English looked really good on the range. He always looks good, though. He's a very well-balanced player, has tempo on almost all his swings. And then who else? Sunjay M. Sunjay M was only hitting around the green shots. He was hitting a lot of fairways, hitting a lot of greens, but then he wasn't putting out those putts. He was walking over to the bunkers. He was walking over to the around the green shots to take a look at, what those shots kind of played like. I kind of like that from Sunjay. Like, he was hitting the ball well, but he wasn't kind of being too full of himself and going like, oh, I'm not going to hit the around the green shots. And another thing is, because he was by himself, he was able to hit a lot more shots. Like, he didn't have to wait for his partners to do certain things. He could hit 3-4 balls from the fairway if he wanted to. And when he was doing that, he was hitting like 4 out of 4 greens, which, if you know anything about Oakmont, it's very difficult to hit greens regulation around there. I guess that's worth noting from the golf course too. Sunjay, he looked dialed in. He's not highly owned this week either. He should be about average to below average ownership. You were looking at Bobby Mack's stats, and it looks like he's not strong on the scrambling and the number of putts per round. That makes you feel like a fade. So a couple things with that. So the stats can be a little bit misleading, especially like when you're looking at very specific things like scrambling from the rough, because it does depend on the sample size that you're using and what golf courses it's pulling that data from. Because if it's Bobby Mack at like signature events like the API, scrambling out of the rough, comparing it to guys playing like Myrtle Beach Classic, for example, like Goddard playing out of the rough. Like, I've heard Goddard touted as like this around the green specialist this week. He is a really good chipper of the ball. I got to see Goddard today play a lot of his around the green shots. He's better than most, would say, in that category. But a lot of the stats that these people that are touting him up this week are failing to realize are alternate field or weak field events where the rough is 1.5, 2 inches. We'll see how he does in 5-inch rough around Oakmont. I don't think it's going to be that same way. So just like that with Bobby Mack, let's circle back to this. The stats, I'm not sure what sample size you're looking at, might look a little bit bad, but remember, he won the Genesis Scottish Open in extremely gnarly rough. He's played very well there almost every time they've played there. He also plays well at really difficult golf courses. I'm personally not fading him, Steven, but if that's part of your process, right, looking at the scrambling stats, as long as it's a big enough sample size, as long as you're looking at like over 24 rounds, then it's actionable. I say you could definitely go with the fade on that because he's getting some ownership. He's not chalky on a week like this, but he's certainly not low owned either at that portion of the board. So I'm okay with the fade. I'm personally going a slightly different direction though. Thoughts on Matty Fitzpatrick, good old brace face as we call him. I like him as a grinder at like difficult tracks, and he's essentially unowned this week. So he did make my player pool as of the last cut. He's not my favorite player on tour, but got to give respect for respect's due. He is a very strong-minded player. He's not going to give up really early. What's going on? Been a minute. Thoughts on Sanjay? So I just gave the thoughts there. Hopefully that answers it. I love him this week. Who is my favorite Smith? Jordan L. Smith, Nick. A shout out to a DP World Tour stud in Jordan Smith, who I'm sure Nick knows all about, so I don't have to explain it too much. To everyone else in the chat, though, that maybe isn't as informed as our European counter tour, he is somebody that is extremely good at ball striking, good off the tee player, good approach player, but can't buy any putts. So if he can avoid the 3-putt bug this week, massive if. I think almost the whole field is going to get the 3-putt bug this week, but if he can at least be okay on that category, he's got a chance. Thoughts on starting lineups with Rahm and Bryson, or is that too chalky? I'm okay with it, Sean. Just it's good that that's chalky to start, right? As long as you know that that is going to be a little bit chalkier than most other builds, then you can account for that a little bit further down the line. So I'm okay with that as long as you're being very mindful with your last 3 or 4 spots. Probably don't want guys like Straka, Lowry, or Connors in that kind of a lineup. He said, is Ballister playable? For viewing purposes, you like that he's in the featured group? Yeah, I might be able to catch him peeing in one of those ditches around the golf course. He's playable for sure, man. He's a U.S. amateur champion, somebody that's a high pedigree player, live golf now. So, a lot of people probably write him off because of that. And that's going to give you low ownership. So I think that's all right. He said, haven't seen Elysian forever. Any thoughts? Well, he's been playing on Live, and I follow Live quite closely because it gives us a good sense for these majors. So I'll be the one to tell you that he's playing amazing this year. Leishman won down in Miami. I got to see that one in person. He's got in contention 4 or 5 times in 2025. He went out there, qualified for this event. So he went out there to one of those Monday qualifiers and won in the top 5, was able to pull it off. Yeah, Leishman for me, he's really playing some quality golf right now. Can I deep dive Novak? I sure can. So let's look at the shots gain metrics, especially if we're doing like a full deep dive here. Novak's playing solid golf, especially with his tee to green play. But Novak has not done anything in majors to this point. It's not like he's his first year on tour. Like, he's not a rookie or anything. He's been around for quite some time. His major track record is a tough scene, to say the least. So that's the real argument against a Novak. The argument for him, though, is that this is by far his best season on tour, and if he's going to break that major record, it's going to be here in 2025. So he's a 5 out of 10 for me. I don't have a hot take either way, but I do like to kind of lay it out, give you the information, and let you make that decision for yourself. You said you're down to eat some Scotty chalk and a 20 max. Yeah, me too, as you can probably tell. And he said this event has the vibes of eating most of the players and spin them out. I agree with that. And like I said, the top 5, top 10, some of those guys are going to survive. There are going to be victims towards the top 5, top 10 too. But I have a hard time thinking that one of those guys doesn't win. Absolutely. We're in this together, Brant. Cheers. Thoughts on Goddard? So I know I kind of just trashed him a second ago, but I'll give you my full thoughts. I don't think he's a terrible play at all. In terms of my projections, he's one of the best plays in the bottom end of the board. However, he's somebody that's getting more ownership than the guys around him. He's over 2% projected owned in my projections. Everyone else around him is like 0.5% owned. So that is a quite big gap at about 2.5% ownership, but he's still only 2.5% owned. So he's not chalky enough at that point where you have to take him out of your player pool because of that. But I'm choosing to get a little bit sneakier with guys on that portion of the board. So, and my critique of it, if you weren't here for that section, was that a lot of his stats are coming from weaker field events. Some of them better field over like the last couple weeks, but the stuff from like 12 to 24 rounds ago, so like the last 24 rounds, the first half of that is what tends to kind of scare me about that. Thoughts on Victor Perez and Grillo? I think Perez is a decent value play. He plays well at courses where ball striking is the name of the game, and this would be, I mean, it's a well-rounded test, so I guess he's like a 5 out of 10 in reality. I don't know if he's the best play. And you said Grillo. Grillo's got really good ball striking form. If you're looking for guys at the bottom end of the board that are gaining off the team, gaining on approach, he's by far the best player that you have for the guys priced around him. But like a Goddard, the question that we just had there, he's getting a lot more steam than the guys around him. In fact, I think I had Grillo at over 3% projected ownership for my lineup for my projections this week. So it's a little tough about that. Did answer about Novak and you missed it? I just did. Sites. I might not have seen your question before, so sorry about that. How many are in my poll this week, Brian? So I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's like 37, I think, around that number. Give or take a couple in either direction. It's about 37. How about a decent pivot, or how decent of a pivot is Hatton in that 7K range? The ownership is lower than most, I'd say, Charlie. But if you're looking for a pure pivot, he's not going to give you as much leverage as maybe what you're looking for. Is he a good play, though? He plays well at harder tracks. So I do think you're onto something there. But I do worry that the ownership's not as low as you think. Thoughts on Aubert? Low ownership. Not a lot of people are going to be playing Aubert this week, BVB. So if you're looking to get different towards the top end of the board, that would be an option to do so. And the thing we've heard for the longest time about Aubert is that he hits it long and straight. He plays well at these major championships. I think he'd have to be a good course fit based on that. Yinzer here said boots on the ground. Scotty was locked in. So I didn't get to see him. By the way, Corey, come say hi if you see me on the golf course. And that's good to know, though, man. I didn't get to see him today. So that's good info for me and my Scotty outright, which I'm not going to share the exact amount I have on Scotty this week, but it's a healthy sum of money. And I put a lot of money on him to start, but I added on top of it over the last day or so. How do I feel about Rasmus? Got to keep the ball in play, but if he has a good driving accuracy week, he is a high pedigree player. So I think he could get there. You got Noah Kent. I can't get there, man, but he is a young stud. So if you're playing Ballister, I guess it's not the worst idea to take a look at Kent. How do I feel about fading Straka? Weekend majors this year and around the green is rough. Yeah, I mean, you're giving me all the reason to fade him myself. I'm personally staying away from him because of the ownership. But yeah, there are reasons for fading him. I do think, though, that, if we're talking about the fade, we do have to mention the other side because I'm not using him in lineups, but his form's great and he's a really good off the tee accuracy player. Both of those things do matter here. So it's definitely a risky game when you're taking an option against those kind of guys, but you got to do it at some point. You can't play all the chalk, as we were mentioning. You said you didn't see Sepp on the course the last few days. Oh, I did see him today, Cody. So I watched him on the range for quite some time. He looked pretty comfortable. He was hitting the ball really straight, which is kind of his calling card. The range session was an 8 out of 10. He looked better than a lot of the other guys on the range. He said, is the course too long for the short guys? I don't think so, Brian. I think if it rains a whole lot, it could. Like on Friday, Saturday, if it rains a whole bunch, maybe. But if it dries out, then absolutely not. The short guys could still play here. Just have to be a really good long iron player if you're going to do that. Thoughts on Cantlay? So Cantlay, I'd have to give a 6.5 out of 10 on. He's not my favorite play, but he does make a whole lot of sense at this golf course. Ball striking form has been there. He's only playing in the big field events too. So like unlike some of those like small sample size 5-6K guys that I think are fool's gold, Cantlay is the exact opposite. Same thing with Victor Hovland, right? They only play in the best fields. There are guys like Scotty that still play in some lower tier events. Not to say that Scotty is not the best player in the world. He is, right? His shots gained, though, are maybe a little bit inflated because he plays in those shitty field events at times. Guys like Cantlay don't do that. So that form really matters, and he's playing some of the best golf in the world for sure. Over under snapped clubs in frustration. Let's go 4.5 sites, and I'm hammering the over on that. And I'll raise you on that and say over under 2.5 putter snaps, and I'll say over on that too. Did I see Rory hitting the driver? I didn't see him at all out there, Brian. So I know he had an early tee time today, so that's why I missed him. I didn't get out there until about 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern. Thoughts on Xander Schauffele? Ownership is lower than it should be, Brian. He's a quality player, too. He said, will we be seeing you in this channel moving forward? Yes, Todd, absolutely. Rounds 2 through 4 will be on this channel. So for Showdown, if you want to stop by for that. Thoughts on Rose? He's an absolute stud. I mean, especially at harder courses in majors, he's a stud. If you play him at like a Pebble Beach Pro-Am or like, I guess a couple years ago he won that, but like, a slightly smaller level field, he's not always the best. And Pebble was the worst example ever, by the way, for that. So completely scratch that. Let's say at like the Charles Schwab Challenge, you play a Rose, it's probably not going to work out. But you play him at Augusta, first round leader, it feels like every single year. And even at these harder tracks that are longer off the tee, like Open Championship last year, Royal Troon wasn't short by any means. He had a lot of success around there too. So I'm okay with it, Brian, especially at the harder tracks. I like Justin Rose. Thoughts on Gerard? Really good ball striking form, getting a little bit of steam, but not too much, I would say. Only got 10 minutes left, by the way. So if I'm going a little bit quicker, that's why. I do want to go through as many questions as possible before we put this all together. By the way, lineup construction segment, we might not be able to do just because I got to end this before 8 so we can do the celebration stream, of course, for James. But he said, thoughts on Griot? Kind of gave those ones before. Good ball striking form, but is getting some steam. Cedric says, Grazerman. He said, thanks for the info. Of course, man, I appreciate the kind words. Grazerman, really low ownership. So if you're looking for a pivot down low, I've seen a lot worse plays. And I like good putters around this course, especially because that's a big defense of Oakmont Country Club. And full transparency, he's in my player pool because of that. Thoughts on JJ Spawn? He said he seems like this might be a good course fit. I kind of see it the other way, man. Just a little bit too short for my liking. And the thing about Spawn, too, is that his form has fallen off a bit. So the ownership's not super high. If you need a pivot, you can get there, but I'm a little hesitant on that one. He said, yeah, the Matt McCarty, I did give my my thoughts before, Alan, so you might want to skip back to that. But I don't love him this week. He didn't look very positive on the golf course. Are the two most important stats driving accuracy and scrambling? I wouldn't say scrambling from the rough. I'd just say scrambling in general because it's not all rough. You have bunkers around the green, you have fairway areas around the green and rough. So I would just say scrambling. Shots gained approach would be my number one, and then scrambling, and then I'd probably go with the driving accuracy. One golfer everyone is fading that I love. That's a great question, man. Let me think about it. So, because I've got to think through the ownership to kind of get a sense of that. I don't want to say Jordan because that's not low owned enough, probably. Let's look at the pricing. That would probably help me out a little bit more. Let's go to like the 7K range. Brooks Koepka. I'm playing Brooks Koepka. Everyone hates him. Everyone's fading him this week. I'm talking shit on his name. And Brooks Koepka, when he's low owned, a lot of times he shits on the field. So we'll see. Thoughts on Pavone? Ooh, that's a tough one for me, man. Probably 3.5, 4 out of 10. Has not played that well in majors outside of Pinehurst, but hey, that was a really impressive US Open last year. So I guess we can't completely overlook that. I will say, though, Pavone, super low owned. So, like, if you have a good take on him or you have a key stat that's putting you onto him big, don't let me saying that I don't like him this week, like, put you off of him. Because if you found a golden nugget, like a, diamond in the rough play down there, he's going to be sub 1% owned. You only have to throw him in a lineup or two to get that leverage. So I'm okay with that. Does Harris get steamed? I think so, John. He's towards the top half of my ownership. So it wouldn't surprise me if he got to 20%. Why would someone play Brian Harman? I don't know, man. I guess they want a hobbit out here, but I'm playing him this week. So, I guess I'm somebody, Chris. Any thoughts on EVR? I think that he's a high upside player, but that's not really what we want at this course. We're looking for guys that can keep it together. And speaking of, Brian Harman's a grinder. So that's why you play him. There's plenty of reasons to want to use a Brian Harman. Yeah, so maybe you just don't like him because he's short. I get that. He does look like a little hobbit out there. Hubbard, stand to any chance, he usually is your punt to go to. Oh, that's a tough one, man. I play him at easy courses. He's a high birdie percentage player, not really the kind of guy to like grind it out for you. Could he like play well in Showdown? For sure. Like I play him in Showdown. Probably wouldn't do it for main slate though. Are the bunkers as heinous as you've heard? No, they're not, Steven. The bunkers are raked a little awkwardly, but they are flat, so you can get some really nasty lies. But if you're in the center of the bunker, they're like your regular tour ones. They're not, they're deep, but they're not anything that these tour players haven't seen. The issue, though, is because they're kind of square-shaped, is you can get into the corners. Let's see. Sorry you missed it, but thoughts on Luddy? So I gave them before. I think he's a decent low-owned player. Again, I got to go through some of the questions we've gone through already a little bit quickly. Was there any golfer that I loved today that I was having second thoughts on? Tommy Fleetwood, John. He hitting a lot of golf balls. Don't like to see that from guys that I'm playing at high ownership. And he was really the only one that I saw grinding. So a little bit of concern, but I'm still deploying him. Are you crazy to play Leishman and James Hahn? Not on Leishman, but you are crazy for James Hahn. Dude, he's been in the announcer booth. I'm not sure if you know that. He's been on ESPN Plus, so I would stay away from that. Poston looked jolly out there today. He was doing a lot of putting. hit a few balls before he hopped on out of there. But what I'll say about Poston is that he wasn't grinding on it. He was hitting a few balls, kind of talking to his caddy, talking to some players, and then getting back to hitting. That's the kind of mindset I want to see from my players. Value play outside of Connors for a GPP. So you're looking in that 7K range, I guess. There's a lot of options around him. Finau's not that high ownership. Go to a Henley Bradley if you can afford it. A little bit cheaper, though. I don't love a lot of the players around him, but I know I pointed out Fitz, Sungjae Imba's plays I thought were decent. Maybe one of those guys. Does Fox get a lot of ownership? I wouldn't say a lot, John, just because he was a late ad. I think probably about 7%, something in that range, but higher ownership than most of the guys around him for sure. You said Luke went through that one before, and yeah, that's all we got, guys. So I'm going to go ahead, cut off the live stream here so that the guys can go through all the celebration stream stuff. I will be doing a prop live stream on my channel, so if you guys want to check out the round one prop stuff for Underdog and Prize Picks, you guys can find that on my YouTube channel in a few minutes. And we're also going to be doing stuff for the sports books on matchups and that kind of thing. And because up here in Pennsylvania, we don't have the pick'em sites, so there's like no Underdog and Prize Picks and stuff. I'm going to be doing all this stuff on like DraftKings this week. So it's going to be using the Juice regular sports books for once. So a little bit of a different live stream over there, but still going through all the conditions and everything to expect for Thursday. But it's all I've got, guys. Going to go ahead and cut it off here as we're towards the end. And best of luck with everything that you guys are going with for this sort of event. And stopping by for rounds 2 through 4, because for Showdown, we're going to be doing the same exact thing. And yeah, it's gonna be some long days out here for sure, right? Being on the golf course, boots on the ground, hot sun, but still gonna be doing the live streams as you guys are come used to. And I've got a pretty good system down for it. I've been on the road for these events for quite some time. I kind of know what to do. Got to give myself like an hour nap before we get into the work in the evening. But we do that, and we're good to go out there for the entire event. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck, and see you guys out there tomorrow night.